The sun beat down mercilessly on the manicured lawns and white picket fences of Willow Creek Estates, but beneath the postcard-perfect charm, darkness lurked. For David Miller, the once idyllic suburb had become a battlefield, where every letter slipped into his mailbox felt like a bullet fired by the very people sworn to protect the neighborhood's peace. At first, he thought it was nothing, routine reminders about grass height or trash bins. But then the notices turned absurd, personal, and cruel. His shutters? Non-compliant. His daughter's playhouse? Illegal structure. And when the HOA threatened his home with foreclosure over fabricated fines, David realized the truth. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. And the board president, Linda Carter, had no idea she was waging war against the wrong man. What happens when a petty tyrant pushes too far, and the quiet homeowner she thought she could break finally reveals who he really is? David Miller was the kind of man who worked quietly, lived humbly, and asked for little. In his early 40s, he had built a life he could be proud of. A devoted father to a bright 7-year-old daughter, he moved to Willow Creek Estates with dreams of stability, safety, and a fresh start. The gated community promised just that. Tree-lined sidewalks, neighbors who smiled, and a place where children's laughter echoed from backyard to backyard. For David, this wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. He spent his weekends building memories, grilling burgers on the patio, planting flowers with his daughter, and even crafting a small wooden playhouse that would become her magical world of make-believe. She decorated it with crayon drawings and stuffed animals, and for David, watching her play there was worth more than any paycheck. At first, life seemed perfect. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, was presented as a group of neighbors committed to keeping things orderly. They promised fairness, safety, and beauty, the kind of structure that gave residents pride in their homes. But what looked like order on the outside was control on the inside, and no one embodied that control more than the board president, Linda Carter. Linda was the type of woman who thrived on power in small spaces. In her late 50s, with a short blonde bob, pearl necklace, and pastel cardigans, she played the part of the friendly neighbor. But behind the smile was a cold, calculating hunger to dominate. She relished enforcing rules, not because they mattered, but because it made her feel untouchable. She wasn't just protecting the neighborhood. She was building her little empire, and David, unknowingly, had just stepped onto her battlefield. The first letters were subtle. A reminder to mow the lawn. A notice about trash cans. David shrugged them off, assuming they were routine. But then came the letter about his shutters. Apparently, the shade of green was non-compliant with community standards. The absurdity gnawed at him, especially when half his neighbors had shutters in the exact same color. Still, he complied, repainting them to avoid conflict. But conflict had already arrived. The following week, another notice appeared. This time about his trash bins being visible from the street, even though they were neatly tucked to the side of his garage. Then came fines, $50, $100, then $250, each accompanied by cold, legalistic language that made his stomach churn. David tried reasoning with the board. He attended meetings, presented photos, even showed that his neighbors had similar setups. Linda dismissed him with the same smug phrase every time. Rules are rules. If we make exceptions, the whole community falls apart. David's patience wore thin when the playhouse became the next target. His daughter had been overjoyed when he built it, squealing with delight as she painted flowers along the walls. But within days, a letter arrived. Unapproved structure. Remove immediately or face daily fines. David attended the next HOA meeting, bringing his daughter with him. He hoped her innocent presence would soften Linda's heart, or at least remind her that behind the rules were real people, real families. But Linda didn't budge. She looked down at the little girl with cold eyes and said, "Rules are rules." The words cut deeper than any fine. David saw his daughter's smile fade, her eyes filling with confusion and disappointment. That night, he swore the fight was no longer about compliance. It was about dignity. The harassment escalated. One morning, David discovered a security camera was missing, ripped from the wall. His mailbox was later found dented, as though someone had smashed it with a bat. Anonymous complaints appeared in his mailbox, disturbing the peace. Unkempt property. Yet when he demanded proof, none was given. Neighbors who once waved at him now crossed the street. They whispered in hushed tones, afraid of drawing Linda's wrath. David was being isolated, turned into a pariah in the very neighborhood he once believed would be his safe haven. But David wasn't a man who folded under pressure. He began documenting everything. Every letter, every notice, every fine. He took photos of his property, timestamps of interactions, and recordings of board meetings. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered. What he found was explosive. The HOA's finances were riddled with inconsistencies. Thousands of dollars marked as community improvement projects were instead funneled into things like private landscaping for Linda's home, luxury dinners, and even vacations disguised as HOA conferences. The very woman who fined him for his daughter's playhouse was stealing from the entire neighborhood. And then came the final straw. David opened his mailbox one evening to find a lien notice. The HOA claimed he owed thousands in unpaid fines and threatened foreclosure if he didn't pay immediately. They weren't just threatening his home. They were threatening his family's future. His hand shook as he read the letter. Rage burned inside him, but so did resolve. That night, he printed every document, organized every piece of evidence, and prepared for war. The night of the HOA meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Neighbors filled every seat, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. The air was thick with tension. Linda sat at the head of the table, pearl necklace glinting under the fluorescent lights, smug as ever. She tapped the gavel, her voice dripping with authority. We're here to address repeated violations for Mr. David Miller. David rose slowly, clutching a thick folder of documents. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. He began by recounting the harassment, the endless notices, the absurd fines, the vandalism. Linda tried to cut him off, but David's voice grew louder. And then he dropped the bombshell. He laid the financial records on the table. Receipts, bank statements, invoices, proof of misused funds. Every shady transaction, every dollar siphoned from homeowners' pockets was now public. Gasps echoed through the room. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes wide, as the truth unfolded. David's words cut like a blade. You call me a rule breaker, but you've been stealing from every family in this community. You've abused your power, destroyed lives with your petty fines, while you lined your own pockets. Enough is enough. Linda's face drained of color. She banged the gavel furiously, shouting for order, but her voice was drowned by the roar of outrage. Neighbors shouted demands, some calling for her resignation, others threatening legal action. The empire she had built on fear and control crumbled in front of her eyes. Within days, the scandal exploded beyond Willow Creek. Local news outlets swarmed the neighborhood, cameras capturing the downfall of Linda Carter. Headlines screamed of corruption, greed, and abuse of power. Legal investigations began, lawsuits were filed, and Linda resigned in disgrace. The community transformed. Neighbors who once avoided David now rallied behind him. A new board was elected, one committed to fairness and transparency. Rules were revised, fines reduced, and for the first time in years, residents felt free in their own homes. David, though victorious, carried the scars of battle. The stress had taken a toll on his health. His relationships strained under the weight of the fight. But as he stood in his backyard, watching his daughter laugh inside the little wooden playhouse that still stood proudly, he knew it had all been worth it. His story spread far beyond Willow Creek. Online forums buzzed with homeowners, inspired by his courage. Communities across the nation began challenging their own corrupt HOAs. Armed with David's example, document everything, stand firm, never back down. David never sought the spotlight, but he became a symbol, proof that one person could topple corruption. His fight was about more than paint colors, playhouses, or fines. It was about freedom, the right to live peacefully in your own home without fear. And as the camera panned out from the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the final line of narration echoed like a promise. When communities unite against corruption, no board, no bully, no HOA can stand in their way.